An earthquake strikes. Clouds of ash and debris shoot into the sky. The sun has been blocked out, and day turns into night. It's the year 79 AD, and you're a citizen of Pompeii who is living through what in your mind must be the end of the world. And the worst is yet to come. Here is what really happened in Pompeii. Number 7. The city of Pompeii was built at the foot of Mount Vesuvius in the 4th century BC and was home to approximately 20,000 people at its height. And none of those people had a clue that Mount Vesuvius was in fact a volcano. We know this because it had been 1,800 years since the previous Mount Vesuvius eruption. During a cool fall day in mid-October, the people of Pompeii were milling about and enjoying the slow-paced Mediterranean lifestyle when, boom! The earth starts shaking violently. Quake after quake shook the ground beneath Pompeii. And then an explosion rocks the top of Mount Vesuvius. It was the beginning of the end. Pop quiz, hotshot. Unfortunately, volcanoes are just a fact of life here on our blue planet. Volcanoes were going off well before we ever got here, and they'll be blasting away long after we're gone. Sad! But in the last 2 centuries, there has been one volcano eruption that made the rest look like popped pimples. The thing was absolutely massive and devastated the people at the time. Which historic volcano eruption do you think caused the most damage to humans? See if you can guess the correct answer in the comments below, and we'll feature the first person to get it right in the next video. Number 6. Mount Vesuvius is hundreds of thousands of years old and stands at 4,203 feet tall. It is the only active volcano on mainland Europe, and it is considered to be one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world due to its proximity to the town of Naples and all of the surrounding towns built into its slopes. It has erupted more than 50 times since its formation. Underneath Vesuvius, scientists have been able to detect a tear in the African tectonic plate. This is known as a slab window, which allows heat from the Earth's mantle layer to melt down the rock of the African plate, which then builds pressure that leads to violently explosive eruptions. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell button to get notified of new videos, and we always appreciate a big thumbs up. Number 5. Before its sudden demise, Pompeii was a flourishing resort town for Rome's most distinguished citizens. It was basically the Palm Springs of the 4th century BC. It had a fabulous location near the Bay of Naples and was dotted with opulent villas and elegant homes. In fact, some of the most pristine and impressive works of Roman art come from Pompeii. Along with the elite vacationers, Pompeii was a bustling town with tourists, townspeople, and servants. It was a vibrant place, replete with taverns and cafes, bathhouses, and open-air markets, and even a brothel for those vacationers who wanted to walk on the wild side. Number 4. Eyewitness accounts. It is estimated that just over 13% of the population of Pompeii perished during the initial blast. And there are extant records of people who observed the catastrophe firsthand. There are 2 eyewitnesses that documented the eruption of Mount Vesuvius and the following disaster. The first was named Pliny the Elder, which is a real tough blow to be named Pliny. Life was hard back then. Pliny was a naval and army commander and was across the bay from Vesuvius when the volcano blew. He noticed the large cloud emanating from the mountaintop. Pliny dispatched several ships to investigate the bizarre scene, but they weren't able to get close because the sky was raining down flaming rocks that were pelting their boats. Pliny headed to a neighboring town where ash continued to fall throughout the night, and by morning, the ash obscured the sun from view. Pliny the Elder died shortly after. Presumably, he was overtaken by the sulfur gas that was released from Vesuvius. The second eyewitness to record the eruption of Vesuvius was actually Pliny the Elder's nephew, who was known as Pliny the Younger. They weren't very creative with their names in ancient Rome. Pliny the Younger reports that people were, quote, climbing through waves of ash to escape, end quote. He recounts the tons of pumice, rock, and ash that pumped out of Vesuvius for the ensuing 25 hours. This debris suffocated the people and blotted out the sky. Pliny describes, quote, black and horrible clouds broken by sinuous shapes of flaming wind, end quote. Number 3. When Mount Vesuvius went off, the heat from its pyroclastic flow was 5 times hotter than boiling water. Pyroclastic flow is the destructive mass of very hot ash, lava fragments, and gases that are ejected from a volcano with mind-boggling speed. This pyroclastic flow can move at a clip of up to 450 miles an hour, and Vesuvius unleashed 1.5 million tons of this stuff per minute. The volcanic debris poured down into the city where citizens were trapped. Conditions soon became dire for those stuck around the city. More and more ash began to fall to the ground. The air was clogged. Breathing was impossible. Buildings began to collapse as the pyroclastic surge descended onto the city and swallowed everything in its path. The bodies of men, women, children, and animals were trapped in their last pose before they turned to charcoal. Number 2. After the Vesuvius disaster, the damage to Pompeii was so extensive and the effect of the tragedy was so acute that no attempts were ever made to reoccupy the area. Pompeii remained buried for over 1,500 years until, by complete accident, it was uncovered in 1599. The first proper excavation of the area didn't begin until the mid-18th century, when Carl Weber, a Swiss engineer, began digging around. Under all of the dust, Pompeii was almost exactly as it had been 2,000 years before. At 150 acres, the walled city is the world's largest archaeological and excavation site. Most of the buildings were intact, and everyday objects and household goods littered the streets. Archaeologists even discovered jars of preserved fruit and loaves of bread. And these archaeologists are still unearthing new discoveries from this once prestigious Roman city. Since the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, approximately 1,044 casts made from the impressions of bodies in the ash deposits have been recovered both in and around Pompeii. Most of these casts were found in buildings where archaeologists believe that people hid until their roofs collapsed. It's answer time. The largest recorded volcano eruption in history was Mount Tambora in Indonesia. This behemoth of a volcano went off in 1815 and caused enough starvation and disease to wipe out approximately 80,000 people. The ash clouds that it spewed from its mouth were so enormous and thick that crops were not able to grow in its aftermath, and the time following the eruption is known as the year without a summer. The ash, sulfur, and gases coming from Tambora were so dense that they caused summertime snow in places as far from Indonesia as North America and Europe. Seismic activity was detected in the area in 2013. Let's hope that after 200 years, Tambora isn't thinking about going for round 2. Number 1. Mount Vesuvius has a 20-year eruption cycle, and the last time it went off was in 1944. This was when a 2-week-long eruption began, with lava from the summit flowing down Mount Vesuvius. It took place at the end of World War II, when the US had the 340th Bomber Group stationed at the Pompeii airfield just a few clicks from the base of the volcano. Guards wore leather jackets and steel pot helmets to protect themselves from the falling debris. Many tents collapsed and caught fire, and some of the bomber planes were heavily damaged. If war isn't bad enough, Mother Nature decided to throw a volcano into the mix. Since 1944, the mountain has laid dormant, which means that it's about 55 years overdue for an eruption. Over 3 million people currently live in the immediate area of Mount Vesuvius. It is the most active volcano with the most people living around it in the world. I hope the citizens living in the Gulf of Naples have a strong exit strategy. Thanks for watching, Badger Buddies. I hope you enjoyed learning all about Pompeii. We certainly did. If you have any topics you'd like to learn more about, feel free to leave them in the comments below and we'll see if we can turn them into a video. Don't forget to double click that bell so that you get notified whenever we launch a new video. See you next time!